Okay, so we're going to hear first of all from Dr. Heather Koldewey, who I've had the pleasure of hearing before. Now, Heather is an absolute ultimate expert. She's the head of global conservation programs at the Zoological Society of London, ZSL, and she's going to talk to us about ocean optimism in a sea of plastic. Welcome, Heather, to the stage, please.
Thank you very much. And I'm a kind of all-in-one collaboration because I'm here in my role as ZSL, also as a National Geographic fellow working particularly on plastics, and very also based at the University of Exeter in Penryn here in Cornwall. I live in Cornwall. And of course, proudest moment today of being one of the SAS trustees. I started as a marine biologist and I'm still totally passionate about fish and actually have been working on seahorses for about 22 years. So for me, this image really encapsulates the point at which the planet is at, that we have a seahorse and a cotton bud. And this has entirely come from our actions and what we've done for the ocean. The second point was having played a small role in protecting one of the biggest areas of the UK overseas territories, the Chagos Archipelago, which became the largest marine protected area in its time in 2010. And I've been fortunate to go on several scientific expeditions there. And this was landing on a beach for just 20 minutes in the largest protected area. It's as big as France, 640,000 square kilometres. And in just 20 minutes in this most pristine, extraordinary place on earth that I've ever been, collecting 334 single-use plastic water bottles in just 20 minutes from 10 different countries, just from the labels that we could see. And this really showed me that impact of what we're doing on the planet. This is a protected, pristine place, and yet our actions had really impacted it, and not in a good way. We're in a fascinating time right now. We talk a lot about the Blue Planet 2 effect and the power of communication. It's a really interesting time to see all of this audience gathered today and see the cross-sector of academics, businesses, passionate grassroots community activists, sports people, and all sorts of sectors here united by this common issue. To get to the Blue Planet 2 effect and that tipping point is also down to the work of some incredible scientists, Richard Thompson, who's here today, who really paved the way for some of the key scientific papers and evidence, looking at other communicators, so Jo Ruxton and her team and the Plastic Ocean, really bringing to light this important topic. And I think the great thing about this catalytic moment in communication has been that we were ready to do something about it. We knew what needed to be done and we could be there to make that change. We had the businesses on board. And to sustain that communication, for me, somebody who's worked in ocean conservation for many years, is quite extraordinary. Seeing Sky pick up the mantle and this being a news item that we see every day in our news feeds. And it was particularly exciting to see the powerful imagery coming to light to show the impact of the plastic issue on wildlife, but also on people. This is very much a social issue as well as an environmental issue. But I live here in Cornwall, and what's been particularly exciting is to see how this has been grasped by people everywhere. So Marazion was the 13th community in the country to become plastic-free. And Marazion School, who will be here, which is my son doing the dab, so proud of him, was the third school in the country to become plastic-free. But this didn't come from the fact that I live in that community and this is my topic and my thing I care about. This came from Rachel Yates, who's now working with Surfers Against Sewage, and the woman who runs the gift shop. The school went plastic-free because of a very passionate teacher who you'll hopefully get to meet later. This is where we are making a difference, is seeing people in communities, in schools, the pupils who care so passionately about this topic and are making a difference. And that's where change is happening. But let's take that reality check, that Emily Penn moment of realizing that this is a really big topic we still have to solve. And I just want to take two particular issues that I've been involved with and to talk you through a solution, which is around fishing nets, and the wider issue that we face between people, poverty, and plastic. So I've been working in the Philippines for over 20 years on the interface between very high marine biodiversity and very high human poverty. And this is some of the communities I work in, where you can really see the challenges of living sustainably with the sea. Here, one of the problems is depleted fish. And that means more fishing and more fishing nets to catch those fish. So this is a vicious cycle, a downward spiral. And this feeds into a global estimate, and I know that WAP and the Ghost Gear Initiative have done some great work in this area. Around 640,000 tons of discarded fishing nets in the ocean every year. And on these islands, it's not just the fishing and the fishing nets. There is no waste management. There is no handy bin man. There's no recycling boxes and have you sorted it right. This is just more and more plastic waste being generated so that these communities are becoming increasingly islands of plastic. So we've taken one part of that plastic problem and created a solution, working in partnership with Interface, who are here today, and we've come up with a project called Networks. Basically, this has set up a global supply chain for discarded fishing nets. So these are picked up off the beaches and out of the ocean. They're cleaned. They're baled using a very innovative baler developed with the Interface engineers using wine press and carjet technology in an absence of electricity. We aggregate the nets. We transport the net. So this is just one shipment that was, I was there last month. This is just one shipment of 10 tons of nets. There were 2 trucks like this. So visualize that. That was all just lying on those beaches and in the ocean. And then exporting them. So we had to solve all sorts of problems along the way, from how do you do export licenses of discarded fishing nets, waste nets, and waste plastic from the Philippines to the European Union, which is all challenging but solvable. And we've ended up by recycling those nets into nylon yarn, by aquafill in Slovenia, and then making beautiful interface carpets. And you're actually walking on them today. So at some point, some of this carpet was made from those nets collected by those villagers in the Philippines into beautiful carpet tiles. We power this by community banks. This is a very well-established model in the development sector, and this provides the much-needed access to financial services that these communities lack. We measure what we do, so we know this has resulted in cleaner beaches. We've measured that, and we know that it's actually reduced the dependence of these communities on fishing and increased well-being. So by selling the nylon nets into this supply chain, we've really changed the lives of these people in these communities. And the figures speak to themselves. Over the time of this project, we've collected over 195 tons of fishing nets that otherwise would be lying in the ocean and on the beaches for 600 plus years. That's enough to go around the world 4 times as a functional fishing net. And 64,000 people have already benefited from this initiative, which we've now replicated in Cameroon and are piloting in Indonesia. So this is a scalable, replicable model. And what we're looking at, we talk a lot about the fact that there could be more, if we don't change things dramatically, there could be more plastic than fish in the sea. It's not only more plastic, there's also a lot less fish. And so we need to work on holistic solutions that also look at how we increase fish. And so we've connected networks with bigger and better marine protected areas at the same time as removing nets from the system. Now, we hear a lot that the plastic problem is over there somewhere and not just here. So I just wanted to give a second example around a very real problem on our doorstep. And again, how we've chosen to tackle that, but in a developed country context. We've taken one flagship species. So we talk about that a lot in conservation. So this is the flagship species for us, in this case, around the single-use plastic issue. And that's the single-use plastic water bottle. And we've taken one tiny city of London. London, we've calculated as best we can with available statistics, uses 1.2 billion single-use plastic water bottles every year. And the beaches of London often look a lot like this. So this is not just an over there, poor country, developing country context. This is very much on our doorstep. And it started with Selfridges, and I have Lucy here at the launch. Now, Selfridges started by going single-use plastic water bottle free themselves and hosting a panel discussion to say what that might look like at a city level. So we took that gauntlet and we ran with it. It's not just about a store moving away from it. It's about changing an entire system. Somehow, in some crazy way, we've come completely dependent on a plastic disposable society in a very short period of time. In my lifetime, basically, this has all come about. So we need to look at how do we move away from that single-use disposable system to a completely different one. And so this is what it's been about. This is not just a campaign about getting rid of bottles. This is about changing a system. So to do that, we've had to analyse behaviour. We've had to look at the economics and the business case. We've had to look at the infrastructure. We've had to look at design, thinking about things like mass sporting events, which are more challenging, around policy and how we support change from the grassroots level with policy change, and how do you make it a social norm to use a refillable bottle? You're not some weird sock and sandal wearing greenie who's on the outskirts of general society, but this is a normal and even a cool thing to do. And I think that's one of the great things about Surfers Against Sewage and Finisterre and many of the organisations to do. It's making this a mainstream activity, and it's making it not only the right thing to do, but a cool thing to do. And we're making incredible progress. We're in the process of installing the first 20 drinking fountains across London with the Greater London Authority and the Mayor's Office, and really championing this. We've done the science to look at how we can support refill, which has started in Bristol and has been a fantastic initiative, championed here by Clean Cornwall, to actually make it really easy and break down that barrier that people have of being uncomfortable to go and pop into a cafe and ask to have their bottle refilled. We've been monitoring the change over time by measuring the plastic in the Thames estuary. It is London on sea. We have to really stop that tide of plastic going in there. And then the great work by Surfers Against Sewage with the plastic-free parliament and with the all-party parliamentary group to actually lead to policy change around plastics and a commitment to do that, and government leading by example on this issue. But I think to frame today, as I got to come up first, I think there's a few tricky questions that I hope there's many of the solutions in this room today. When we hear from Emily, we realise that things are still very big and very problematic. We're still scratching the surface of some of the challenges. There's much groundbreaking research coming from the University of Plymouth, the University of Exeter, and other researchers showing how significant this issue is, and we're finding plastic everywhere in the ocean. We have to sustain this collaborative approach. Actually, we're doing pretty well on that, but we must never get to the position that we compete versus collaborate. This requires all of us working together to solve it. We have to keep decisions based on sound science. We need to make the best informed decisions that we can, but we become vulnerable if we don't base it on fact. I'm repeatedly getting now, if all the plastic just comes from 10 rivers, as I read in the news, do we need to worry about anywhere else? Yes, we do. We need to look at the London cases, the on our doorstep cases. We need to look in our own home and our workplaces and actually do something about that. And how do we keep it simple? People are getting the simple messages around bags, cups, and so on. What do we do when we've cracked those and it's getting more complicated? And we need to look at the relative roles we're asking. We tend to jump straight to recycle. We really need to bring the reduction conversation front and central about people reducing their plastics. And with that scientific evidence, we need to make sure we don't move people from one problem to another. So there is a big parallel work stream that needs to happen to be looking at the solutions all the time. We also need to think of this in the wider context of ocean conservation. We're starting to talk about the ocean, which is incredible. It's a mainstream conversation, but there are very big issues facing the ocean, from overfishing to climate change. There's many different solutions out there. We need to think, how do we use the plastics narrative as one to leverage a much bigger conversation about the ocean and its protection? And how do we really make the most of the current conversation, the political will, the public engagement around this issue, and not lose that energy and enthusiasm while people move on to the next topic that's next year? We know this is a long-term issue we're going to have to solve. So we're going to have to be creative and thoughtful in terms of how we do that in the long term. And we see amazing local solutions here. We see fantastic people doing fantastic things. How do we really bring those to scale very, very quickly to actually really make a difference? Thank you.